name is Bill Mueller, and I help entrepreneurs, authors, and anyone with an audience how to write story-based emails to stand out in the inbox. So today, I want to tell you all about story selling for authors, how to harness the power of storytelling to create loyal fans and buyers. We got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Let me move this out of the way a little bit. Okay, here's what we're covering today. Number one, why email and why storytelling, how to get started, what to put in your emails, 11 tips, tricks, must-know email list hacks to tell better stories, boost your fan base, and sell more books. So let me just tell you a brief introduction about myself. I've been an entrepreneur and business owner since 2005. I've sold my own products in addition to helping others do the same. And I've pretty much specialized in copywriting, product developing, high-level strategist and consultant. I've helped a lot of businesses with revenue and sales and influence. And you should also know I'm a lifelong lover of fiction, with an understanding that a lot of authors are reluctant to sell and how to overcome that. I specialize in working with coaches and product owners in how-to markets, but other fields as well. Anybody that's trying to sell a product, I can help them with. I live in the Seattle area from Southern California for a long time. So let's get started. So let me ask you a question. What do you think it would do for your writing business if thousands of loyal subscribers looked forward to reading an email from you on a somewhat regular basis? And I say somewhat because we're going to get into how regular you should mail your list. And I know everybody's got different tolerances and expectations for that, and we'll cover that. So it sounds amazing, right? I mean, it is. It absolutely is. It can really revitalize your business and create a lot of sales. But for a lot of you watching, you might be wondering, how do you get started? How do we actually do that? What is this all about? And that's what we're covering today. So our first topic is, why are we doing this to begin with? And isn't email dead? You hear that all the time, right? Which is, for anybody in the business of doing what I do, we all know that's laughable, that email's actually never been more relevant than ever. And I'm going to prove that to you. So, like I said, this is all about email story selling for authors. Why email? Email story selling for authors. You might be, for sure you get the part of story selling, but what about the selling part? And why email? We're going to get into that right now. And the way we're going to start is I want to tell you a quick story. This gives you a good metaphor as to why we're doing this and what this is all about. And a while back, not too long ago, I wrote an email to my list about this trilogy that I really loved. Have you guys seen this? The Before Sunrise trilogy with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. They had 3 movies starting in the mid-90s with Richard Linklater. And it's basically the story of two 20-somethings who meet on a train in Europe. They spend a really romantic and fascinating 24 hours together. And then instead of exchanging contact information at the end, they agree to meet in the exact same spot 6 months later. And that's what that's all about. So the reason I'm bringing it up here is I just happened to run across this quote from Julie Delpy, who was in the movie. And I'll just read this here. It says, "When you're young, you believe you'll meet many people with whom you'll truly connect with, but later in life, you realize it only happens a few times." Now, I saw that because my radar is always attuned for stories from my emails. And I saw this and I'm like, you know what? That could be an email right there. And because anybody who's at least middle-aged or older can relate to the truth of this quote. So let me explain a little bit how I use this. So there's a quick GIF from the movie. And, as we know, whether we're reading a great novel or we're seeing a movie that we're really into, you're really pulled into that thick soup of the experience, like utterly transported, right? That's an easy reverie to fall into when it comes to your personal life. But what about business? I write emails to business owners that want to do more with email in their business. And I thought, you know what? What about these little hinges that can swing big doors, as they say? Which doors are you failing to open? Which trains are you missing? These guys were on a train and they go to meet later, and I won't tell you what happens in the movie, but email it's a real missed opportunity. Email, to extend the rom-com analogy, email is like the girl in that rom-com where the leading man couldn't see because he's too busy chasing that unattainable coworker who only dates DJs. That's email. And, of course, that leads to the, oh my God, she was there all along. The classic rom-com punchline. That's email in my mind. That's the missing piece for a lot of authors building their fan base. It's certainly the missing piece for a lot of businesses that I work with, but I think it's absolutely relevant to fiction writers. So that's the metaphor I like to use. Let's now get into this. So the military has this acronym called BLUF, bottom line up front. Let me just give you the bottom line up front for emails. Writing emails to your list. The two greatest forces you can leverage to increase your readership and book sales are email and the power of story. And I firmly believe that. And that's what we're going to be getting into right now. So let me just show you some proof on how this works and why it works so well. So first of all, this is from Forbes magazine. Return on investment per $1 spent. You can see email on the left at $40 per every $1 spent. I've seen ranges given anywhere from $35 to $46, but you can pretty much count on about $40. You can see these other platforms return on investment. So email is very much worth your time. In other words, if it takes you $1 to acquire a new reader on your list, that person could turn into $40 if you do things right. So let me just give you a couple more quick stats as proof. Not only the 40-to-1 ratio on ROI, but 88 studies show that 88% of people check their emails every day. Nearly 40% check their inboxes 3 to 5 times a day. Think about it. How many times a day do you check email? Probably multiple times. Studies also show that people are 3 times more likely to make purchases from email marketing than from social media. I've seen this over and over again. People think that social media posts on Facebook or Instagram can really move the needle. They can get people on your list, but when it comes time for people to take an action and make a purchase with you, email is way better. 59% of consumers say marketing emails influence their purchase decisions, making email a powerful tool for authors to promote their books and drive sales. You need some more reasons? How about building a loyal community of readers and future readers? It lets you connect directly and personally. We're going to talk about this later, but email is such an intimate one-on-one channel compared to other ways of keeping in touch, including social media. And never forget that when you connect directly and personally like that, it's great because people like to buy as much from you as your work. And that's true in the business world, and I believe it to be true everywhere else. It also is going to give you leverage with any partners or publishers. I mean, if you can tell a publisher you've got an audience of so-and-so thousand, that's going to be a lot of pull for you. And it also obviously gives you a really low-cost marketing tool for promoting your books. Let me give you some more reasons. It makes your book aspirations and writing more real. When you have a list, it makes you feel like you have an audience. It doesn't just make you feel like you have an audience. You do have an audience. Having fans who want to hear from you is really motivating, right? It will propel you to that last page of your manuscript faster. And you don't need a large list to experience the benefits. And you don't have to write endless emails or many emails. We're going to talk about frequency in a minute. So let's talk about how to get started, first of all. So let's address a common thing. It might be the number one thing that holds people back from really getting started or sticking with it. They think they're annoying people by sending emails. So let's dispel that right away, or at least reframe it for you. And the way we reframe that is think about it. I'm sure just about everybody watching this is watch Netflix or Apple TV or whatever platform you use. We're certainly all big book readers. Would you ever wish that when you're reading a great novel, it wouldn't end? Or a Netflix series, just to think of one of my favorites. I guess it was HBO, not Netflix, but when we watched Hacks last year, the new season's coming out, we didn't want it to end. So when you're entertaining and you provide really insightful, engaging, entertaining content, people can't get enough of what you've got. So you're not bothering people. So you're never bothering people when you're entertaining them or being helpful or being sincere. But there is an unsubscribe link in every email. It's great if people unsubscribe. You're not going to be for everyone. And you can feel good about sending as much email as you want, knowing that people have the opportunity to get off your list whenever they want. I always like to say nobody ever dies from sending an email. So it's a lower impact risk thing than you think. So if you have thoughts that you're worrying about bothering your list. It's just something I would try and just kind of reframe is how I look at it. So the next way I want you to look at this is to look at this picture. I think we all know who these people are. Do you recognize them? You sure do. And this is another reason you don't have to worry about annoying your list or feel like you're bothering people. Because why did people like this show? Or why couldn't people never get enough of this show? It's because they felt like they knew these people, right? They were characters. They felt like real friends. And that's what you want to do. I mean, think about it. When you get an email from a friend, you don't think of it as being bothered. You know, you could say, well, I'm not emailing my friends. Well, if you email them in a certain way we're going to talk about, they're going to feel like they are getting an email from a friend. That's the way it should feel. And we do all this by not only imparting useful information, but being yourself or a little bit of a personality. And if that sounds too intimidating, just think of it as just being a real authentic person. People crave that. People naturally crave those who have some sort of knowledge or expertise or talent and are authentic. All right, so let's talk about how to come up with your stories. We're like fish that don't know they're swimming and don't know what water is because they're in it all the time. And that's the way I think of stories. We're awash in stories all around us. We don't realize it because our radar is not attuned for it, but we're going to talk about that. Examples, something in the grocery store, coffee shop, a random conversation, something you overheard. Literally anything that happens around you all day can be used in emails. And another way to look at it is start noticing what sparks emotion within you. So instead of thinking about stories, just sit down with a legal pad or something, or just notice throughout your day what sparks emotion within you. That could be anger, joy, something funny, something that just made you feel good, a pet peeve that makes you want to go on a little bit of a rant. I'll give you some examples that I've used for my emails a little bit just to show you how trivial the story can be and still be very effective. But first, I want to give you this great quote by Stephen King that I ran across. Let me read it here. It says, "Let's get one thing clear, shall we? There is no idea dump, no story central, no island of the buried bestsellers. Good stories seem to come quite literally from nowhere, sailing at you right out of the empty sky. Two previously unrelated ideas come together and make something new under the sun. Your job isn't to find these ideas, but to recognize them when they show up." Now, Stephen King's talking about ideas for books probably, or short stories, but this is also how you should look at collecting stories out in the field, so to speak, to use in your emails. And of course, you might end up using them in your fiction as well, depending on what kind of fiction you write. But I like this quote because it really is, he really puts it on us to recognize these when they show up. So let's talk real quickly about how to capture your ideas. You want an easy way to capture these ideas because you're on the go. Voice dictation, a Moleskine notebook, Apple Notes, whatever's easy for you is the way to go. And what you want to do is build up your story vault, right? You want to keep either a Google Doc. I keep mine in a spreadsheet. I also have an Evernote file for all my stories. Whatever's the bottom line is don't get caught up in the technology of it. Whatever's easiest for you and something you will actually do, just start with that and you can always refine it later. How to get started with all this? Well, I think your first step should be this. Just decide how many times you'll email your list. Make it reasonable and achievable. Twice per month is a really good start. That would be 24 emails per year in your first year. But if that feels a little too steep, you can make it once a month. I personally think once a week is ideal. I mean, think about it. If you do 24 emails a year, twice a month, you can, the more the better. And I'm not saying email every day, but once a week is a great thing to shoot for. But hey, if it's just once a month to start out or twice a month, make that your goal. You can always ramp it up later. Let's look at a common mistake in getting started, and that's waiting. There's no reason to wait. You don't need a big list. The other big mistake I see is starting a list and then ghosting them, like you don't write for 6 months. It's a big mistake I see all the time. So how to get started with your list? Well, invite friends, family members, peers in writing groups, coworkers, neighbors, anybody you can think of. You can offer a bonus for joining your email list, whether it's a short story or just something you wrote. Make it easy, and make it easy for them to say no. In other words, make it really easy for people to unsubscribe right up front. You won't sound defensive. You'll sound like you're being very considerate of them. So that keeps it low pressure. And that's a great way to get started. So the very first email that goes out, you want to do a few things. This is your welcome email. You want to set expectations. One of them is letting them know how often you're going to be mailing. Show some personality at the very least. Tell us how you got to where you are, to the point to having this email list and what made you an author. Show some passion. If you have a mission with what you do, talk about that. And invite engagement. Encourage people to hit reply. And a good best practice for that is to ask them something simple. Don't make it too complicated where they have to think really hard. Otherwise, they probably won't hit reply. And of course, in the welcome email, don't turn it into an infomercial for yourself. Authors tend to not to want to do that anyway, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. But those are some of the best practices for the welcome email. So I want to get back to this practice of keeping a story vault because it's so important. This is a book here by Matthew Dix. That's a great book. It's called Storyworthy, and he had a great technique in this book that I still use to this day. And what it is you take 5 minutes at the end of every day, and you write down a one like quote unquote story-worthy moment of the day. Takes 5 minutes at the end of the day. You can end up storing them in Evernote or a spreadsheet, like I mentioned before. And the questions you want to ask yourself at the end of the day is, what made today different from any other day? This is what I got out of this book. If I had to tell the story of today, what would it be? What's the one moment that sticks out, no matter how small it might seem right now? And I really do mean no matter how small. You'd be surprised how these moments are just very telling later on. We tend to dismiss the moments that happen, in the heat of the moment or the same day. But I can guarantee you that they will make for great newsletter fodder if you just start keeping a file of them. And again, the reason we're doing all this is so that you never run out of ideas. You never have to sit down to a blank page. It eliminates the I don't know what to say syndrome. It helps develop your story and content radar, turns you into an email writing idea machine, and it's fun. And it's also enlightening and will enrich your life. Years back, you'll look back on this list, and it's a great little archive to have. So here's how it works. You basically just write down anything that pops into your head during the day you think might make for a good email, or just anything that's interesting at all. Don't even think about how it might fit into your email newsletter. Don't judge it. Just write it down. You'll analyze it later. And like I said, just use whatever tool works for you, whether it's Apple Notes or whatever. Just use a consistent system that's easy for you. Let me give you some examples that are just super small things, just to give you an idea of how simple this can be. And these examples I'm about to show you were all really well-received emails. They were entertaining. They were super simple, just ordinary moment things that worked out well on emails. One was I got a text message from my friend he's a great friend, but he's into all these crazy conspiracy theories. And he texted me a photo, a supposed photo of a UFO. I turned that into an email. Super ordinary moment. So I just, in my spreadsheet for that day, I just typed in, Tom sent me the UFO email. And you just have to write just a couple lines because you'll remember the rest of it later. This is one where I got lost driving. I had some family members in the car, and I kept looking at my iPhone, and it kept rerouting me. And I just thought it was amazing how patient it was. It was so non-judgmental. Everyone in the car was like, where are we going? Everyone had an opinion. And the phone just kept calmly rerouting me. And I thought, wouldn't that be great if we could operate more that way personally? Something goes wrong, I'm just rerouting. I'll stay calm. I'm not describing the email well, but it was a entertaining email. You can also get stories from outside your own life. So I remember coming across a headline that said, "Why did Bruce Lee wear a yellow jumpsuit?" And I thought, that's interesting. Why did he? I did some research, and it was a very easy thing to find out. And that had a counterintuitive answer, and that made for an email. So you can find stories, just from your perusing of article sites. My wife sent me a very odd text message one day. I was leaving the gym. She puts the minimum amount of words in a text. She's one of those people. And I got this text, and I opened it up, and it said, "There's something dead on our roof." I immediately saw it. Number one, I was concerned what was on the roof. But number two, I thought, that's an email. I just my radar is attuned for these simple, odd moments, and they don't even have to be odd. They can be ordinary. But those are just some quick examples. Here's another example, and I'll tell you why I'm giving you this one in a second. This was a story about how I ruined Christmas one year as a little kid. And I basically accidentally broke a pinball machine. It was the best gift the Mueller family ever got, and I ruined it within the hour. And the reason I'm bringing this one to your attention is because it's very relatable. Everybody's got a Christmas disaster story, don't they? Or whatever holiday you celebrate. Everybody's got a wedding moment, a Christmas moment, whatever it is. And that's what makes for great relatable emails. I know someone who's in this industry. She wrote a great email about how her laundry light went out. Most simple thing in the world, but it was really entertaining and interesting because of what I'm about to show you here. A great quote from Carl Rogers: "What is most personal is most general." So again, I'm only getting into this because I want to really make it clear that the bar is really low for what can be a story in an engaging email. It can be things really ordinary. So let's now talk about what to put in your emails. We've talked a little bit about that, but let's get more specific. So here's the problem I run into with what most businesses do, and I'll show you how it relates to authors in a second. They don't email at all, and when they do, they resume with a launch or a promotion just because they need some money. And if you're an author, you don't want to ghost your list, make the same mistake. The other problem is they just send content without any intention. These businesses, they'll just send discount coupons. So that's not the way to go about it. You want to think about entertaining and staying in touch in a personal way, not just in a transactional way. And the solution for doing this is you use what always works, and that's entertainment. Information and value is great. That's super important. But never forget that people want to be entertained. Why are people watching Netflix or reading novels to begin with? It's to be entertained. So I maintain that being entertaining in some way is more important than content, and even more important than the quality of the stories you're telling. Never forget that people are looking for any excuse whatsoever to not read your emails. So if you are consistently entertaining, they will continue to open your email. So if you're an author, what should you be writing about? Well, here's just 4 quick things to write about. Behind the scenes insights. And what do I mean by that? Well, non-writers are still really fascinated by writers, which I find really encouraging. They are continually interested in finding out what your writing process is, how you come up with ideas. Just show us where you write. Show us your favorite coffee mug. Do you write by hand on a legal pad? Do you use a word processor? You think these details are super boring and ordinary, but never forget, these people are fans. They've read your stuff, or they're about to, and they're fascinated with the writing process. For years, I used to get the Paris Review, that literary journal, and they always had a feature they called the Art of Fiction. For those of you who remember that, maybe you still get the Paris Review. And it was basically just a Q&A interview with writers. And they would always ask them how they would get their writing done, where they got their ideas, how they wrote them down, where they wrote. Philip Roth, for example, used to just walk out to the shed in his backyard, go in for 8 hours and come out. It was just very workmanlike, but it was fascinating to read. So share about, what it is that you do, how you live the life of a writer, even if it's sitting at the kitchen table half hour before you go to bed. Another thing you can write about is pass along some exclusive content. If you're doing research for your genre, let's say you're a genre novelist and you need to do research, for sure you probably came across some fascinating research. Include that in your emails. People would just eat that up. Talk about your characters. Maybe even interview them. Let your audience get to know them as real people. Explain how you came up with them, how you came up with the idea of so-and-so character. And your audience, if they get to know them as real people, that'll keep them opening your emails as well. Here's some fun questions to ask in your emails. And this is, and also not just answer yourself as part of the content of your email, but ask your audience to hit reply and give their opinion. I heard this great question from someone else. It was, what books are a part of you, even though you haven't read them in a long time? I love that question. And I can think of a couple myself that would fit. Everyone's got their own personal views on that. What book do you periodically reread, and why? Are there any books you've changed your opinion on over the years? If so, why? We all change over time, and the books change with us, or our perception of them does. That would be fascinating email newsletter fodder. Write about a book that is a pillar of your genre, or write about a book that you think should be a pillar of your genre. and then ask your readers to reply with their own thoughts on these topics. Those would be great emails to read. All right, so now let me give you 11 what I call must-know email list hacks for authors. These are just random tips and tricks that'll help you in your email journey. So tip number one. So the story behind this one is I wrote an email to my list about this. So I get asked all the time, what should I do if I have neglected my list? I ghosted my list for 6 months. I feel bad about it, and I want to start emailing them again. Okay, great. Should I come clean and tell them what happened? Well, this slide is all about, if you watch the show Seinfeld, George Costanza, played by Jason Alexander right there, did something in an episode that Larry David on the right there, the creator of Seinfeld, happened to him in real life. He was writing for Saturday Night Live. You probably heard this story. It's famous, or if you haven't, here it is. He was so frustrated that his sketch was not going to be in an episode of SNL. He made a big to-do. He blew his top and he said, I quit. And then he goes home. He's stewing over the weekend and he deeply regretted it. And he's like, I'm an idiot. I need the money. I want the job back. And his friend said, why don't you just go back into work like nothing happened, just show up at your desk and start working on Monday morning. And he did exactly that. Nobody said anything. It was hilarious. It was brilliant. And that became an episode of Seinfeld. George did that. And that's based on a true life story. So that's my tip. If you have not been emailing your list too often and you want to come clean, just show up again. People aren't keeping track of your emails. People don't really care. Just show up again and start serving them again. Okay, tip number 2, don't be intimidated by I know that you guys watching this are storytellers naturally, so you're not intimidated by having to tell a story in your emails. But to even lower the bar further, think about story elements, not just stories. As long as you give someone a story element, and I'll give you some examples in a second, that's enough. Like I said, you want to just be entertaining. And if you give them an element of a story, it's still going to stand out from all the other emails in their inbox. So what do I mean by story elements instead of a full story? Like we're not talking about the hero's journey or all these archetypes and story arcs that you would do to write novels. These aren't novels. These are just emails. We just want to be a little bit entertaining. Even if it's just, I'll give you an example. Even if you just open the email by saying, I'm sitting at Starbucks on 6th Avenue and the rain's really hitting the window really hard right now. And the guy next to me is talking really loud in an annoying way. Like just update people on where you are writing right now. Just set the scene right there. That's a little bit of a mini story right there. That alone will keep people opening your emails, believe it or not, because it's personal and you're pulling them into where you are. So I've got a picture of Aaron Sorkin there with, is that Jesse Eisenberg, the actor? So Aaron Sorkin was famous for starting his movies with what's known as a cold open, like just dialogue, just drop you right into the story. So if you just put some snippets of dialogue or open an email with a line of dialogue you heard or a quote you heard or you heard somebody say something, like that's a really nice, strong pulling lead that pulls you in. You do that once in a while, people will open your emails more because they know you're dropping them into something compelling right away. A random thing you saw. It doesn't have to be a full story. You could do a little aside, take a little aside or do a quick mini rant on something. I opened an email once with, I was in the supermarket yesterday and I went to buy some toothpaste and I noticed that there's like 150 brands of toothpaste and each brand has 4 different varieties of each one. I took a picture of it in the store and I said, we have too many choices. And my proof of that is look at any toothpaste aisle. It's crazy. So it turned into a mini rant. It was just my thing. But if you write it in an entertaining way, it becomes personal. My last one there is some telling detail. Even if you just, like I said, set the scene where you are, like in that Starbucks I mentioned, ordinary details give people that, what I always think of as the shock of recognition, which is the great hallmark of any good fiction is we can really put ourselves there. Okay, tip number 3. I get asked all the time about transitions. How to transition from the story to the point of your email or whatever it is you're trying to do in the email. You want to tell a story. Transitions are they can be difficult sometimes, but for the most part, they're easier than you think. Sometimes you can tell a story that has nothing at all to do with the point of your email, but you can still get away with it just by acknowledging it. So I'll give you an example. I've got 2 pictures here. I wrote an email about each one of these people. Jewel, you already know. I wrote an email about her story. I heard her story on a long form podcast. It was incredible, her journey. I didn't know about any of it. I wrote an email about it, and I finished the email by saying, because my email list, I'm teaching people how to sell their products through email. And I'm like, you might wonder what the story of Jewel has to do with the point of this newsletter. And I said something to the effect of, I'll be honest, there is no good way to segue from this. Sometimes a story should just be told just because it's a great story, and we'll leave it at that. The other picture you see, the black and white picture, is a guy named Larry Walters, who in the early 80s tied a bunch of helium balloons to his lawn chair and launched into space and got caught up into air traffic space above LAX. It's an incredible story. The New Yorker did a big thing about it, written by George Plimpton. I wrote an email about it. Same thing. It had nothing to do with whatever my list topic is about, but it was such a compelling story. All I had to do was just transition by admitting, I'm just taking a hard turn here. I just wanted to tell this story, and you'd be surprised how well that can work. Okay, the next tip is don't write, just talk. Be conversational. Whenever somebody tells me they have trouble writing, I always tell them that writing is simply talking on paper. I pretty much believe that in many ways. Maybe not certain kinds of novels for sure, but emails are best if they're conversational. You can even try dictating your emails with some voice-to-text software or a handheld recorder if that works for you. That's a picture of one that I use sometimes. iPhones, of course, iPhones and smartphones in general, of course, have good voice memo things. That's the way I'm getting emails written more and more now, is just by talking them out. Dictation. Tip number 5, forget what you learned in English class, but also remember it's important to know the rules before you break the rules. Now, this is old hat to you guys probably because you're fiction writers. I love that quote from Joan Didion. Grammar is a piano I play by ear. Tip number 6, use images and GIFs. Now, this is not everybody's style to use images or GIFs. So if you choose not to do it, that's fine. There's nothing mandatory about it. But they can be great little storytelling devices. And that's because they can really infuse emotion in a way that words can't. Our brains process images like thousands of times faster than decoding letters into words. And that's not to be ignored. Tip number 7 is to encourage interaction with your list. Ask for replies. Like I said before, keep the questions simple with low stakes because, well, I've got on the slide because we're all exhausted. That might be overstating it somewhat. But if you give people difficult questions where they really have to put their thinking cap on and then hit reply, you're going to get way less replies, if any. But people do love giving their opinions, even dumb little questions like Coke or Pepsi, believe it or not. I know someone who sent an email, and it was a picture for kitchen counters. He was writing emails. His client was a kitchen countertop provider and a contractor. And it was a kitchen counter that was pretty crazy looking, but it was kind of cool looking too. So the subject line was, is this amazing or ridiculous? And you open the email, and it was a picture of the kitchen countertop, and he just wanted to know, is this amazing or ridiculous? And he got a flood of replies because everybody wants to opine on stuff like that. So think about what you could do in that regard. Like, is this piece of writing really bad or really good? I remember once I was in a writing workshop, and the writing teacher flagged one of my sentences that I thought was pretty good. And I could tell she wasn't quite sure if it was great or if it was just really over the top too much. And she didn't say, is this amazing or ridiculous? But she said something to that effect, and the class weighed in on it. And so many years ago, I forget what the outcome was. It's just a way of saying that you can use the same question in the literary way as well. Tip number 8, never forget that you are the brand. You establish your brand, you establish yourself by being your brand. In writing emails is you're a person who has experiences and tells fun anecdotes. So you write emails over a period of time that shows people, hey, I'm the person that sends emails with cool stories in them or personal anecdotes, or who's a little bit weird, whatever your personality is. Or your brand is you write emails like you're sending them to a friend, and that's the way you should approach it. Make the email sound like a friend from your BFF. That's always good advice. Tip number 9, use the rule of 1. And what I mean by that is you're not writing to a list of people. Think about that one person on your list that you most resonate with, like somebody you might think of as your best friend. And just write to that one person, but you're going to send it to everyone. And you could pretend that that friend is somebody who reads the same sort of books you do, and they're sitting right across the table from you, and you write in that tone of voice. You just tell them a story, and you just think of it that way. That might lower the bar for you as well. Tip number 10, write emails so good they can't ignore you. That's just a phrase I always keep in mind. When you write emails that are really good, it makes your subject lines irrelevant. So there's a lot of talk in email marketing about open rates and click-through rates and all that. And everybody pays attention to subject lines. But here's the thing. When you write emails that are consistently so good, the subject line almost becomes irrelevant because all they do is see your name. And they're like, oh, that's from that Bill Mueller guy. He writes good emails consistently. I'm going to open that. They're not deciding based on the subject line. They're deciding on the fact that it's because you sent it. And then you know you're on the right track in terms of being able to write emails that are so good they can't ignore you. If you miss a day or two or you haven't emailed for a while, you actually get replies that say, hey, what happened to you? Are you okay? Have I missed any of your emails? So you know you're on the right track when you get engagement in that way. Tip number 11, write in the one-to-one silo. So this is very similar to the tip a couple ones ago. And I think Anne Lamott might have said this, but I'm not sure. I looked it up and I couldn't tell. I couldn't find it. But there's a quote either from Anne or someone else who said, when I'm writing my novel, I like to think of somebody in a library pulling down my book for the first time that's never heard of me. So I like that a lot. That's not exactly the way I would put it for somebody reading your newsletter, but you can just get a sense of the intimacy there that she's getting at. That's that very personal tone you want to aim for. Okay, so those are the 11 hacks. Let's now wrap it up. Let me give you a summary on a single slide. So storytelling or story selling for authors. Here's a summary on one slide. Don't wait till you get a big list. Start today. Commit to writing a set number of emails per month or week. Start and maintain your own bank of stories so you never have to start with a blank page. Think less about creating content and more about just being interesting or entertaining. Show your personality. Write conversationally as if you're writing to your best friend, and be yourself. Those are some great guidelines, and those would probably be my biggest takeaways from what we've discussed here. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Here's where you can find out more about me. This is Bill Mueller. My website is Story Sales Machine. Appreciate you watching, and thanks very much.